Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 22nd of September and we are going to cover three very important topics which are in news. The first topic, the most talked about topic nowadays is the India-Canada diplomatic standoff. Now Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, when he visited during the G20 summit in Delhi, he picked up some issues for talks with the Indian Prime Minister. And the issue was killing of a Canadian national and alleged involvement of an Indian intelligence officer in that. The investigations were not over, but it seems that the Canadian Prime Minister was pinpointing and affirmatively saying that the involvement of the Indian officer was confirmed. He was brushed by the Indian Prime Minister and by other leaders as well. Now, since he has gone back, he has been talking about a lot of things. He's been quite vocal about, the involvement of the Indian officer in the killings of that Canadian national. That Canadian national happens to be a Khalistani sympathizer. And the investigations are not over yet. The results have not been found out, but yes, these kind of affirmative statements from a leader like a Prime Minister of a developed country is coming, which is actually disturbing the relations between both the countries. That Indian officer who was posted in Canada has been suspended. In a tit-for-tat move, India has also suspended one of the diplomats from Canada. India has issued travel advisory to its citizens and, has suspended visa operations. Now in all this, we will see where India-Canada standoff is leading us. What is India's position in terms of trade with Canada? How many Indians are living there in Canada? We have a few facts, we will be discussing them. And what is the geopolitics involved? Means, what are other countries saying, or how does this diplomatic standoff between India and Canada impact other countries? So, that all we will be covering in this particular topic. Next is intended nationally determined contributions of India. We call them INDCs. These are the voluntary set of contributions which every country, whether developed or developing or underdeveloped, had to adopt. These contributions these countries would be doing for conserving the environment. 2014, the Paris Pact envisaged for this INDCs, and hence India adopted 3 INDCs in 2015-16. It was also mandated by the Paris Pact that these INDCs have to be updated within 5 years of time. And hence, India came up with its second set of INDCs in 2021. These INDCs have been in picture. Presently, the United Nations General Assembly is happening. There also, there was a meeting yesterday, and in that meeting it was discussed that the G20 countries, especially from where the 80% of the emissions are coming from, need to speed up their INDCs, need to intensify their INDCs and fulfill the targets. You would be happy to know that India has successfully fulfilled the targets it set out for itself in the first set of INDCs in 2015. The target year was 2030. We completed it way back in 2021-22. In 2021, we have adopted new set of INDCs. So in this particular section, we will be seeing what were the INDCs adopted by India way back in 2015-16 and what are the INDCs adopted in 2021 by India. So we'll see this. Then principles, organs of the United Nations. This we gave a briefing about this in the previous videos, but yes, in detail we will be covering all the 5 principal organs today. One of the principal organs, that is the United Nations General Assembly, is into meat. And that is why this topic becomes important. It becomes important for us aspirants to understand the structure of United Nations. So we will be covering this topic. India-Canada diplomatic standoff. One of the most pressing issue in today's time, and at the core of the issue is the Khalistani movement. The Khalistani movement, which started in the 1970s and 80s in India, it spread to Canada after Operation Blue Star. The sympathizers of the Khalistani movement, or the followers of Khalistani movement, they went underground in India after the killing of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, the leader of Khalistani movement, and they made their base in Canada. Not only in Canada, but yes, we can find the sympathizers in Australia, UK and other countries of the world as well. They have one demand, that is Khalistan. Khalistan, land of Khalsa. But India and Canada have come at loggerheads with each other in the present day scenario. The issue is killing of a Khalistani sympathizer way back in June 2023. And the Canadian Prime Minister is saying that there may be an involvement of an Indian officer, the Indian intelligence officer posted there in Canada as a diplomat. He may be involved. It has not been proven. But this kind of statement is coming from the Canadian Prime Minister, as well as Minister of External Affairs for Canada has also given this statement. In this pursuit, Canada has suspended that particular officer and has asked him to leave Canada. Not only that, Canada has exposed his identity to the world. In return, India has also expelled one of the Canadian diplomats posted here in India. India has also issued travel advisory to its people visiting Canada. And India has also suspended the visa operations, citing the reason that our officials in the embassy over there in Canada are not able to function properly, as well as here. So, we will not be issuing visas as of now. Many Canadians do travel to India and as tourists, and they have to take the Indian visa from the Indian embassy over there. So the situation for the Indian embassy is a bit complicated right now because they are facing security threats from the Khalistani sympathizers there in Canada. Apart from this, many countries in the world are finding them in a fixing positions. Countries like USA, who are an all-time ally of Canada, and on the other hand, they do not want to strain ties with India at any cost because India is, their answer to China. Australia is also there, who's having good diplomatic relations and as well as economic and political relations with Canada. So these kind of countries, they are stuck in the middle. And we don't know how long this war or diplomatic war is going to go on between India and Canada. But yes, it should end fast because it is the people who are suffering the most. Canada should also learn from other countries like UK, Australia, how they have managed the Khalistani sympathizers over there. So let's start with this. The Indian-Canada diplomatic standoff. India and Canada have come at loggerheads with each other. Issue is Canada's allegations, which are not proven. This is the key word. That is why the Prime Minister and the Minister of External Affairs has been saying that the Indian officer may be involved. The Indian agent may be involved. Maybe simply means that it has not been proven. Involvement of an Indian officer, intelligence officer in killing of a Khalistani separatist, and the name of that separatist was Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada in June 2023. Canada has expelled the Indian officer. India in return has also expelled a Canadian diplomat posted in India. Not mentioning the names of these people because it is against, I would say, the sanctity of that position which that person was holding. So, as responsible learners and as a responsible teacher, would not like to highlight the name of those persons. India issued travel advisories to Indians traveling to Canada as well as to Indians in Canada for their safety. India has suspended visa services also to the Canadians, citing various logistical concerns the members of its embassy are facing in Canada. So, that is all what is happening right now. However, we need to understand the political situation in Canada also, so that we'll get a better understanding of the topic. Now, Justin Trudeau, the current Prime Minister of Canada, has formed a coalition government. And one of the supporting parties in this coalition government is the New Democratic Party. This New Democratic Party is of Mr. Jagmeet Dhaliwal. Mr. Jagmeet Dhaliwal is also said to be a Khalistani sympathizer. Government of India believes this. And maybe he might be putting pressure behind the doors on the Canadian Prime Minister. Maybe this threat of withdrawing support would have been there. Anything can be there. So this is the speculation of the government of India. And this can be the probable link why the Canadian PM, without completion of the investigation, is taking affirmative actions like these. Because a person of his stature, the Prime Minister, head of the government of one of the most developed countries of the world, is behaving irresponsibly. Yes, I'm sorry to say, but yes, it is irresponsible behavior. Because see, unless proven guilty, you are innocent. This is the basic fundamental of justice. So, the Indian diplomat who has been expelled has not been proven guilty. So, these kind of statements should not be coming. But anyways, let us see some India-Canada fact sheet. Now, when I talk about the India-Canada, FDI coming from Canada. FDI is foreign direct investment. We saw it in yesterday's session also. That is that investment which comes and creates infrastructure and jobs in India. It is more stable. So, from 2000 till 2023, these 23 years, how much FDI has come from Canada? It is somewhere around $645 billion, which is not so much, I would say, in terms of FDI. Okay, it is just 0.56% of the total FDI which has come to India from April 2000 to June 2023, these 23 years. Second is, Canada is home to 5.26% of overseas Indians. We have a 32 million strong diaspora. The largest of our diaspora is in USA. Then we have a very substantial diaspora in West Asia as well. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE and all. In Canada, around 5% or 5.26% of the Indian diaspora is staying. Around 16,89,055, I would say, Indians are living over there. Out of which, 1,78,000 are NRIs, means they are holding Indian passports, but they are staying there for some purpose like education or jobs, and 15,10,645 are PIOs. Persons of Indian origin or people of Indian origin. They are holding Canadian passport, but they belong to India. So this is the mathematics. 5.26% of total India's total diaspora. Then 16.89 lakh total citizen or total Indian origin people living there, out of which 1.78 lakhs are NRIs and 15 lakh something are PIOs, means they have got Canadian citizenship over there, and those are the voters over there in Canada. Every 7th Indian student abroad is Canada. So every, if I take along or if I take into picture all the students going to study abroad from India, so every 7th student in that pool is in Canada. Canada is the 4th largest source of tourists in India. So a lot of tourists do come to India, and to these tourists, the government has denied visa right now. Even the e-visa facilities have been suspended. Bilateral trade, means import plus export, is also less. When I talk about the bilateral trade, it is somewhere around $8 billion. And India has a trade surplus with it, means India's exports are more than the imports. So this is there. Canada is the 35th biggest trading partner of India, because $8 billion is very minuscule amount of trade. The highest trading partner is USA, expected to have around $180 to $190 billion of trade. Second highest is China, having $130 to $140 billion of trade. So $8 billion of trade is less, and that is why 35 billion or 35th biggest trading partner Canada is of India. Now, we need to understand one more thing as well, that Canada is a country where a lot of immigrants have been settled down. Immigrants not only from India but from all across the world. And they have been given Canadian citizenship, many of them. We also saw that out of 16-17 lakh Indians staying there, 15 lakh have got Canadian citizenship. They are PIOs. So likewise, there are people of many identities, cultures, they have settled down in Canada. They are considered as immigrants in Canada. And, they also have much influence on Canada's foreign policy. Now, how do they have? According to many diplomat experts, Canada's foreign policy is hostage to the immigrants in Canada. Why they say that it is hostage to immigrants in Canada? Because Canada at times has to take actions what those immigrants are demanding, because those immigrants have become the vote bank over there in Canada, and they are demanding to have these kind of relations with that country, obviously their parent country. So Canada will have to have, otherwise they will use the vote bank. So it is like this. Examples: the Russian and Ukrainian immigrants shape Canada's Russia policy. The Hong Kong and Taiwan immigrants shape Canada's China policy. The Jewish immigrants shape Canada's Israel policy. Sri Lankan immigrants shape Canada's Sri Lanka policy. During the civil war happening there in Sri Lanka, these people put a lot of pressure on Canadian government. And Canada, everyone knows, is good friends of USA. So they actually easily reach to USA via Canada by putting pressure on Canadian government. Then Afghan immigrants shape Canada's Afghanistan policy. Khalistan immigrants have hijacked Canada's India policy now, because there might be pressure on the Prime Minister, which is running a coalition government, from one of the coalition members also, who happens to be a Khalistani sympathizer. So this is I would say a possibility with very high probability right now. Out of 20 lakh Indian diaspora in Canada, roughly 8 lakh are Sikhs, out of which only 1% are pro-Khalistan, controlling 12 to 15 Gurudwaras. So technically speaking, 8 lakh Sikhs live there in Canada, obviously of Indian origin they are, out of which only 1%, that is somewhere around 80,000, are pro-Khalistani. And they are creating a problem, but they control around 12 to 15 Gurudwaras, which means they have religious influence, and from here they can have political influence on the entire diaspora. It is also believed that these Khalistanis are also into threatening the Indian community over there, attacking their religious worship places, attacking the officials of the Indian embassy. These kind of, I would say, things are happening in Canada according to the government of India. So this is there. Now this is also very interesting, the geopolitics involved in the issue. Now when you are good friends with someone and you are also good friends with someone else and they both are fighting, now you are in a very, I would say, complex situation. And in this case, you is the USA. USA's all-time ally, Canada. USA is one of very good partners, trading partners, strategic partner is India, which USA definitely does not want to lose upon, because USA knows that it is India only which can contain China. So USA, countries like USA, Australia, France, UK, those who are good friends with Canada and also good friends with India, are finding themselves in a difficult position right now. And this particular slide we'll see that how it is there. Canada is member of G7. Other members of G7: USA, UK, France, Germany, Italy and Japan. It also shares intelligence with Five Eyes grouping. This is a new term or a new grouping which you should know the members of these Five Eyes grouping, because UPSC asks these kind of questions in prelims. USA, UK, Australia and New Zealand, these four, and Canada, the fifth. All these countries are also close partners with India, like India is there in Quad, USA, Australia, India, and Japan over there. So this is also there. On one side we have these kind of groupings, on the other side India is part of these kind of groupings. So this complicates the situation for these countries who are in the middle. However, USA, UK and Australia, these three countries have given statements on this particular issue between India and Canada, but their statements are balanced and nuanced because they know the importance of India right now and they are old-time allies of Canada. Having said that, if it is proven that the involvement of Indian officer in the killing of the Canadian national, it is there, then it will definitely dent India's image, particularly created after the G20 summit. But Canada should also be learning a few lessons here. Lesson number one is that you should not be revealing the identity of intelligence officers whose identity have been kept low profile by their host country or by their parent country like India. Second of all, you should also be learning to tackle these kind of separatist sentiments or anti-India sentiments in your country, and you should learn the lessons from countries like UK and Australia. They have also Khalistanis over there, but they are well under control over there. So this is what we need to take out from this particular issue which is going on. Intended nationally determined contributions. This is a term which needs to be understood from its background. The background goes back to 1972. 1972, the first time ever, the United Nations met for a global problem, for an emerging global problem, I would say at that time, and that emerging global problem was the problem of climate change. It was a significant event called as the Stockholm Convention, but nothing concrete came out of it. The world leaders knew about this and they were constantly working towards creating an institutional framework for tackling climate change. 20 years down the line, in 1992, the Rio Earth Summit happens. The Rio Earth Summit, which was a landmark event, and in this, three major conventions were adopted. The first was United Nations Framework for Combating Climate Change. Second was United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, and third was United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Now all these three conventions had their own schedules of meeting. Some of the conventions were meeting once in 2 years, some were meeting once in a year. So every meeting of these conventions was called as COP, Conference of Parties. Now narrowing our focus upon UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework to Combat Climate Change, because that was the framework which was dealing with climate change. The COP3 of UNFCCC happened in the year 1997 in the city of Kyoto. It was popularly called as the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol divided the countries all over the world into developed and underdeveloped or developing. There were two categories created: Annexure countries, Annexure 1 countries, and non-Annexure 1 countries. One of these classification entailed all the developed countries, and the other classification entailed developing and underdeveloped countries. Why this classification was done? This classification was done to justify the fact that global warming or climate change has been the gift of the developed world. The developed world which have done a lot of emissions till now, starting from the Industrial Revolution. At that time they were developing, but due to those emissions they have developed. And the developing and underdeveloped countries of the world today are facing the circumstances due to the historical emissions done by them. Are these emissions still impacting, or are these emissions still contributing to climate change? Yes. A carbon dioxide molecule emitted 150 years ago still contributes to climate change because it is still there. The gestation period of a CO2 molecule is so long. And that is why a moral responsibility was given on the developed countries that you need to, restrict your emissions now. Under Kyoto Protocol it was there, and if you emit beyond this limit, you will have to invest an equivalent amount in the developing and underdeveloped countries. However, these kind of obligations was not there on the developing and underdeveloped countries. You could emit how much ever you wanted because it was your time to develop now. And development does not happen without emissions. So, this Kyoto Protocol was adopted. The developing countries obviously were happy, the developed ones were not. The developed countries, gradually came out of this agreement. Like USA was out, Japan itself was out where this was adopted. Now, Kyoto Protocol, we need to understand one more thing about it, that it was 1997 when the Kyoto Protocol was signed, and it was 2005 when the Kyoto Protocol was adopted. But this division in Kyoto Protocol, which divided the countries into developed and the other category was developing and underdeveloped, did not sustain this protocol itself. In 2015, under COP21 of UNFCCC, it was decided that we will do away or we will be done with this kind of divisions. We will make every country responsible and we will ask them, whatever you want to contribute, you contribute to save the environment. It should be determined by you. And hence, the concept of intended nationally determined contributions came up, where the countries had to intend by themselves that what they want to contribute to conserve the environment. And hence, India submitted its first set of INDCs. India submitted 3 INDCs, and India, being a developing country, the INDCs were so ambitious that the countries who were developed were looking towards India and were saying that how will you accomplish this? India sweetly replied, it's my job, I'll do it, I'll take care of it. And India did take care of it. And that is why we hear the Indian Prime Minister talking so much vocally about it. The target year for most of the INDCs we adopted in 2015-16 was 2030, but we accomplished them in 2021 itself. And that is why the Indian Prime Minister is heard as we accomplished these goals with respect to climate change 9 years before the target. And in 2021, we adopted a new set of INDCs. And these INDCs were 5 now. Earlier there were 3, now there were 5 INDCs, which was rightly called by the Prime Minister as Panchamrit. It was COP26, the city of Glasgow in UK, where we adopted this. So let us look into it, that what were the INDCs earlier in 2015-16 and what were the INDCs in 2021. They are also known as nationally determined contributions. India first pledge had 3 primary targets. There were 3 INDCs. The first was to reduce emission intensity of the economy. Now we need to understand this word emission intensity. As we know that, growth will not happen without emissions. It has not happened for the developed countries of the world today because they did emissions in the history, in the past, then only they were able to develop. And it is not going to happen now also. You produce something in the factory, you emit. You transport that product to anywhere else, you emit. So emissions will be there. Emission intensity can be defined as how much emissions you are doing per unit of GDP. For creating 1 unit of GDP, how much emissions you are doing? Now coming back to the same example, if I'm manufacturing a product in a factory, I'm doing emissions. I want electricity for that. Electricity is coming by burning coal to me. Now what if my factory is getting renewable energy? So then emissions will be less. So emission intensity will reduce. So the target we kept for ourselves was to reduce the emission intensity of the economy. What is the mathematics here? How much we have to reduce? we have to reduce it by 33 to 35% below the 2005 levels. Means in 2005, what was the emission intensity of our economy? We have to calculate that first, and from that level we have to reduce it to 33 to 35%. So 1/3 reduction from that level we have to do. This was the first INDC. Second INDC was to have 40% of installed electric power from non-fossil based energy sources. Now we need to understand one more thing, that energy sources are of two types: fossil based, non-fossil based. Fossil based will include coal, petroleum, those are fossil fuels. Non-fossil based fuels will include renewable sources like solar, or you can say small hydro, wind, and other sources like nuclear power. Nuclear fuel is not a fossil based fuel. Or large hydropower, hydroelectric power projects, HEPs. All these are non-fossil based fuels. So we had to generate 40% of our installed electric power from non-fossil based energy fuels. And the third target was to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide. Carbon sink is basically the trees, the oceans, which take in carbon dioxide and give oxygen. So we needed to plant more trees, we needed to clean up our oceans, which act like carbon sink, which will suck in the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and give oxygen to us. Carbon dioxide sucked in from the atmosphere, definitely global warming will reduce, because it is carbon dioxide which is trapping the heat. So these were the three INDCs we adopted in 2015-16, and according to the Paris Agreement, countries must update their pledges every 5 years to make larger commitments to reduce GHG emissions. And India stood by this also. It was very less countries, I think less than 50 countries, which revised their INDCs, and India was one among them, despite being a developing country. Now at the COP26 to the UNFCCC held in Glasgow, UK in 2021, we adopted 5 INDCs, and we called them, or the Prime Minister of India termed them as Panchamrit. Now what were the INDCs? First was India will increase its non-fossil fuel energy capacity to 500 gigawatts. Earlier we were saying 40% of our total energy produced should be from non-fossil based fuel. Now we are saying 500 gigawatts by 2030. We need to produce this much from non-fossil fuel energy sources. And it is estimated that by 2030, 800 gigawatts will be the requirement of the entire country, and out of this 800, 500 is coming from non-fossil based fuels. This would be an achievement because that figure would be more than 50%. Earlier it was 40%. Presently, we have reached around 167 gigawatt. Let's see how we reach to 500 gigawatt by then. Excuse me. We will meet 50% of its energy requirement from renewable sources. Now, renewable sources is one sub-component of the non-fossil based fuels. The total projected carbon emissions will be reduced by 1 billion tons from now through 2030. We have to reduce this much carbon emissions. Means we will be emitting this much or this less carbon emissions will be done by us. The emission intensity, we covered what emission intensity is. Earlier it was 33 to 35% reduction. Now it is 45% reduction of 2005 levels. We increased that from 33 to 35 to 45%. Next, India will achieve its target of net zero by 2070. Net zero means whatever carbon we are emitting, we are sucking that much. So we have to be here by 2070. Obviously, we are a carbon positive country right now. Means we are emitting more carbon as compared to sucking it. However, there are 7-8 countries like Bhutan and some countries in Africa. They are carbon negative or carbon neutral right now. So we need to be here by 2070. These were the revised INDCs. India, being a developing country, performing very well in its first set of INDCs, hoping to perform well in its second set of INDCs also, will definitely be a I would say, champion of tackling climate change, and that too despite being a developing country. It will also be a big lesson for those developed countries who have done the emissions and are not having such ambitious INDCs. The principal organs of the United Nations. United Nations Organization is a global organization which was formed in the year 1945 after the end of the Second World War. However, this was not the first ever global organization. It was preceded by the League of Nations. The main aim of United Nations when it was formed was to avoid any wars in the future and for looking for overall development of the humanity, restoring human rights of the people. And for that purpose, United Nations was actually operating through 5 principal organs. At that time there were 6 principal organs, but now there are 5 principal organs. United Nations General Assembly, United Nations Secretariat, United Nations Security Council, Economic and Social Council, and International Court of Justice. The Trusteeship Council, which was dissolved in the year 1970s, it was dissolved. So let us look into each principal organ in detail. Now, United Nations General Assembly formed in 1945 along with United Nations only. Now, what does United Nations General Assembly do? It is the main deliberative, policy making and a representative organ. Means deliberative policy making means laws are made, policies are made over there, and voting is done just like Lok Sabha here at the national level. And all 193 member countries are members of United Nations General Assembly. It meets in September every year. Presently, the meeting is going on in its headquarters, New York. Decisions are taken by majority, some by special, some by simple over there. And UNGA president holds a 1-year term. UNGA president is chosen from one amongst these countries. So, this is the basics of UNGA. Next is United Nations Security Council. It is actually one of those organizations which is most talked about. It is here we need the reforms. Now, it was also formed in the year 1945. Objective was to maintain international peace and security. It is also controversial that it is not able to maintain peace and security internationally because the world has witnessed many conflicts since then. Afghanistan, Russia, Ukraine, in West Asia, Syria, Africa, multiple conflicts the world has witnessed. But this is actually questionable. Is it successful in its objective or not? But yes, since a world war has not been there, so some experts say that it has been successful. Membership, 15 members are there, 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent. It is where India is wanting to be because these 5 permanents are USA, UK, France, Russia and China. And India wants to increase its membership over here. The G4 countries, if you remember, they all are advocating for increasing the membership, the permanent membership. Total membership is 15, 5 are permanent, 10 are non-permanent. Non-permanent member, if one remains a member for 2 years. Now, powers, it can impose sanctions, like it imposed sanctions on the Taliban when 9/11 attacks happened, and authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace. Like UN peacekeeping force are under the mandate of UNSC. Next, International Court of Justice. International Court of Justice is just like the Supreme Court of the world. If any 2 countries are having conflict with each other, they can approach the ICJ. ICJ will do the hearings and give the judgment. The judgment is binding. Now, it is basically headquartered in Hague, Netherlands, and it is the only principal organ out of the 5 principal organs which is headquartered out of New York. All other are headquartered in New York. It is the principal judicial organ of the UN. Here also the members are 15 and decisions are taken by relative majority over here. Role is to settle in accordance with the international law, legal disputes submitted to it by states, give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by the authorized UN organs and specialized agencies. So, This is basically the job of ICJ. Now comes UN Secretariat. Actually, this is the most, I would say, one of the most important organs of the United Nations, because it handles all the secretarial work. What proposals will be picked up for discussion, how they will be discussed, what will be the clauses, everything is framed over here. The Secretariat is doing all the secretarial work. The head of the Secretariat is the face of United Nations. It is considered to be the head of United Nations. Like in the present scenario, Antonio Guterres is the CAO of UN Secretariat, and hence we call him the UN chief. Okay. So what is it? Headed by Secretary General. In the present day, Mr. Antonio Guterres is carry out day-to-day work, organization of conferences, preparation of budget, etc. of UN as mandated by UNGA and other principal organs. Chief Administrative Officer is appointed by UNGA, the General Assembly, on the recommendation of UNSC for a 5 years term. Now that person will be there for 5 years term. However, this 5 years term is actually not mentioned in any UN charter. It is by convention. We'll see. This person is known as UN Secretary General, UN's foremost representative. He is appointed for a term of 5 years. Actually, the length is discretionary, but since 1971, there is a convention of 5-year term. So it has been written nowhere. It can be more than 5 years also, but since 1971, we are limiting it to 5 years only. And finally, the last principal organ is United Nations ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council. Now, what is the job of this principal organ? The job of this principal organ is coordination, which is actually very difficult. Coordination between the principal organs and coordination between the specialized agencies of United Nations. Now, what are specialized agencies? We have discussed that day, but yes, if I talk about United Nations, we have 5 principal organs we have just discussed. ECOSOC is one of them. Then we have specialized agencies. Specialized agencies are like World Bank, IMF, WHO. Then we have UNICEF, UNESCO. We discussed about this when we were discussing about the UN Heritage, UNESCO Heritage tab. And then we have related organizations. These are actually regulatory organizations like WTO, which regulates the world trade, like IAEA, which regulates the supply of nuclear fuels across the world. Like these are there. Now coming back to this ECOSOC. What does ECOSOC do? Economic and Social Council. So by the name it suggests that it is for economic and social welfare of the world. Now let's suppose a vaccine has to be rolled out in Africa. A vaccine for dengue has to be rolled out in Africa. Now ECOSOC will see this, that will see the requirement, a vaccine has to be rolled out. Now it will do what? It will tell the UNGA, please adopt this proposal in your assembly in the ongoing session. The UNGA passes it. Okay. Then UNGA, after passing it, it comes back to ECOSOC again. ECOSOC will tell the WHO, the World Health Organization. World Health Organization, UNGA has passed a resolution. You now implement it in Africa. WHO will say, Acha, sir, I need funds for that. ECOSOC will say, okay, the World Bank issue funds to WHO for rolling out this program. World Bank will issue funds. This is how coordination is done by ECOSOC. And result, social benefits, economic benefits, like this vaccine entails social benefits. So this is what the job of ECOSOC is. It serves as a central mechanism for activities of UN system and its specialized agencies in the economic, social and environmental fields. Members 54 elected by UNGA. No need to memorize. So this was it from today's session, I would say. I hope you've understood the things, and we will only be understanding things from the exam point of view. Mirch masala is there everywhere. But from that mirch masala, we have to take out the things which are very important for us for exam point of view. And our lectures, our slides are solely focused on that. So it is my sincere request to all those who watch that you need to get your focus right. You need to filter out things in the right way. You don't need to get carried away. Okay, and this is it from today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow with some more important news pieces or very important information which is very much important for your prelims, mains as well as interview. Till then, keep studying, keep writing, keep reading, and most importantly, keep revising. Jai Hind, Namaste.